Are you dating a dismissive avoidant female or have a dismissive avoidant female friend and are really trying to understand her but finding it difficult? Well, in this video, we're going to talk about 7 things the dismissive avoidant female wants you to know, even though they may not share it. So, first and foremost, I think one of the biggest sort of aha moments for people who are in any kind of relationship with a dismissive avoidant is that criticism affects them more than you would think. And because they're often so stoic, you wouldn't necessarily know it or notice it because they may not say anything about it. But if you are somebody who gives really blunt feedback or gives feedback in a more critical way, one really common example is that if you're an attachment style or just an individual who tends to communicate in the reactive form instead of the proactive form, an example being if you say something like, hey, you never do the dishes, rather than saying, hey, I could use some support. Could you take a turn doing the dishes? Even those types of things can often land as critical feedback. And as a result of this, what you'll see is this individual tends to sort of protect themselves and sort of pull away from any kind of experience where something could be taken as criticism. And it's because they're actually much more sensitive when it comes to these things than you might realize. And on the flip side, number 2 is that dismissive avoidant women and men both tend to really appreciate being appreciated and being acknowledged and being supported. So if you're in a position where you think that you have to give feedback to a loved one that's a dismissive avoidant, it can be really beneficial to start by talking about something that you do appreciate or you do want to acknowledge about them, then share the criticism that you have in a constructive and proactive way, talking about what you do need, not talking about what they don't do enough of. And then sandwich it with sharing something at the end that is also supportive or acknowledging. So, those are the first 2 really important pieces. Number 3, dismissive avoidant women have feelings much more than you might realize. Just because somebody doesn't express their feelings in an outward manner, or they aren't as forthcoming with their feelings or as vulnerable, it doesn't mean that they are not feeling their feelings and feeling their emotions and that they are not affected by things, even if they are not really showing too much that they are affected by things. And I think that that's something that a lot of dismissive avoidant females tend to really want other individuals to know and understand about them. But it's also tricky for them to express that or communicate that because, as you know, dismissive avoidants have this big protective mechanism where they've learned to kind of disconnect and not share their feelings as openly because of that fear of really being vulnerable around others and how that may be taken. Number 4, when dismissive avoidant attachment styles, especially women, do withdraw from an argument, and we could say the same thing about men, but they tend to withdraw because they are trying to prevent the conflict from escalating more and because they are trying to sort out what they're feeling. I think that one of the big common misconceptions is that because a dismissive avoidant is withdrawing, it means that that's their way of like stonewalling you or trying to ice you out and then it's like malicious or intentional. But the relationship that the vast majority of dismissive avoidant women have to this is not to punish or stonewall or hurt somebody. They withdraw because they are trying to, number one, sort out their feelings, and number two, stop the conflict from getting too heated. And I've had so many dismissive avoidant clients over the years say a variation of this, which is, I'm scared I'll say something that I'll regret, or I'm scared I'll say something that will make the situation way worse or that I can't take back. And I've heard so many variations of DA women say these things, and their relationship to it is actually healthy. And I think that it's important to realize that people have different rates at which they process their feelings and warm back up and are able to sort of explore how to communicate. And dismissive avoidants are just more of like a slow burn when it comes to this. They really take their time to whittle through their feelings, to understand what it is they're experiencing. And they just need space a lot of the time to do that. Now, as I'm going through all these different things, this is not a video that's meant to be like, hey, you should walk on eggshells around dismissive avoidant women and do all these things all the time perfectly. That's not the expectation, nor should that be the key takeaway. What is ideal here is that you have the understanding about things that dismissive avoidant females may not share directly, but that can be really beneficial to understand about them in a relationship. But ideally, what you want to be doing is communicating your needs to one another, communicating about these things to one another. That's a huge part of what it takes to become securely attached. And the more you are able to share your feelings, your needs with one another in an open and healthy and constructive way, And the more you're mastering communication in a relationship, the faster of a pace you will get out of the power struggle stage of relationships. And also, the more longevity your relationship is likely to have. Number five, dismissive avoidant attachment styles definitely value space because they need to recharge in that space and because they value independence. You have to remember that as a dismissive avoidant, when their attachment style was forming, essentially what would have happened is you'll see a dismissive avoidant be yearning for attunement because literally every person is biologically wired for attunement, for presence, for connection. And when their parents or caregivers couldn't give that connection to them, what ends up taking place instead is there's sort of this pervasive pain around that because a child is yearning for something that they can't gain access to in the way that they need. And this goes on for long enough that the dismissive avoidant eventually adapts by saying, okay, it doesn't feel good to want this from somebody. I'm going to protect myself and try to create relief for myself by trying to not really want it much at all, by trying to be very reliant on myself, not need something from somebody who's not able to give it to me. And that adaptation actually creates relief for them. And so as a result of that adaptation creating that relief, it becomes a programmed mechanism, right? The fear is relying on other people in that way again and having that deep sense of rejection. So when they start to have their independence and it creates relief, they build all of these positive subconscious emotional associations to this. And now they feel like, wow, like my independence is so important. It's freed me from this pain and this stress that I might have felt at a young age. Now, that may not be a conscious process for a lot of dismissive avoidance, but that is a subconscious mechanism that is there. And so trying to do anything that would violate their independence or potentially compromise the independence can actually feel like a threat to their survival strategy at a deeper level. And it's why they value it so much in relationships. And also, I've had many conversations with people who have said things like, yeah, I also really value my partner's independence. I want to protect their independence as well, which of course can be confusing for somebody if they're anxious, preoccupied, and they're not really seeking that independence. But I think something that's important to remember is that what we're seeking for is interdependence. We're seeking for the ability to rely on other people, feel safe and comfortable doing so, but also feel like we can meet our own needs and we can be very self reliant. They're not supposed to be mutually exclusive things. They're literally supposed to be things that you are a master at both sides of that. And that's going to be what creates that interdependency and that health in relationships. Number six, I think that it's very common for dismissive avoidant women to feel unseen or unheard or misunderstood. I mean, there's a very healthy argument to make essentially that dismissive women may feel like this because often they are not seeing and hearing and understanding themselves. Because if we're disconnected from our emotions and we're not really wanting to feel too much of our emotions, and we're trying to repress them or soothe by kind of avoiding ourselves in different forms, doesn't mean they're not feeling them. But if somebody's constantly going to their creature comforts as a means of soothing, then they may not fully understand or hear or see what they're experiencing, and it can make it more difficult to then convey or communicate to a partner or to a loved one. And obviously we'll start to see that shift and change as dismissive avoidants start becoming more secure, but usually like a traditional dismissive avoidant who's sort of starting off their journey, that can be a point that they really struggle with, and they often as a result feel misunderstood in their relationships. And part of this can be, of course, that they communicate more indirectly, but it's also really valuable to ask your partner or loved one for understanding. Hey, I want to understand you. I feel like how you're communicating is a little bit vague. Can you clarify for me? Like, if you can ask those questions, even if you're not able to fully understand everything it is that is being shared or communicated, if it is in more indirect ways, your loved one will then know that you are trying, that you care, that you're making the effort to do that work and to try to understand them, which in and of itself will make them feel more seen and heard and understood. And the very last thing that I'll say for today's video is when a dismissive avoidant does share how they feel, give them the space to express it. And then it's always beneficial to positively acknowledge or reinforce things. I think that another thing that's often underestimated is how well dismissive avoidant attachment styles respond to positive reinforcement, not negative reinforcement. So if somebody does something in a relationship and you love and appreciate that they did that, or you see that they care, It's also really valuable to give that positive reinforcement. And if instead they're just sharing how they feel, giving them the space to share how they feel and then validating their feelings, acknowledging how you can understand what they're experiencing or going through often will help them feel a lot more comfortable doing that in the future. And it will again positively reinforce that momentum that you want to see.
So, I have some really exciting news, and it's that integrated attachment theory training is back. In other words, you can be trained to become a relationship coach certified in integrated attachment theory in literally 60 days. So, who's this for? Well, of course, this is for any individual who wants to make an impact and really be of service to others while also obtaining freedom and flexibility and abundance in their lives. And this is also for anybody who's already a counselor, a therapist, a coach, and just really wants to expand their toolkit. We've had so many people enter into the integrated attachment theory program because they're just looking to obtain a certain degree of mastery in terms of understanding their own attachment patterns and also the attachment patterns of maybe their children or partner or other loved ones in their lives so they can really support those people and understand them more deeply. Now, please keep in mind that the last 2 times we ran this program, we filled up very fast. In fact, we oversold the programs and sold out completely. So if you're interested, click the link below to learn more and dive in with me. And I'd love to see you on the other side before seats run out.
So that's it for today. If you have more questions about this topic, please share them down below. And if you want to see more content about the dismissive avoidant female in particular, please hit the thumbs up button. And I hope you consider subscribing to this channel. We put up pretty much daily videos every single day, and I would love to have you as a part of our community. Thank you for watching.